Welcome to TradeTheNBI.com. This is Jonas Reports for the 7th of April. Yesterday was sort of that kind of resting situation, though we are seeing some signs of weakness developing here. Steel cross below cyan, even though cyan's below red, you're just barely there. I mean, that can literally change today. Potentially, depends on where things are at. Shakeout's still rising, though we're getting closer to the histogram and the yellow line. So potentially weakness today, next day, you end up with a lower histogram. And that would be potentially a possibility. What we're looking at here's the NBI indicator. What you'll notice, it doesn't have the orange or that gold line of before. I substituted the orange line for the magenta, and we converted the blue line, which was the gold line. And what we look for in that case, just like we talked about before, when red is above the green, you typically are in trend, particularly when the magenta is over yellow, and when it crosses over, then you get a flip. You can see the narrowing as it kind of rolls to a peak here, and we're already starting to see just a slight rollover. It hasn't happened completely yet. So daily's not there. If we look at the 50K, it's sort of already done a little bit. We're seeing a decline, which is not unusual, but it did so with the blue line here well above the green. And then we started to see this little shifting back and forth where we started to see some intraday weakness developing within the market. And even now, we right at that potential where blue crosses back down below, putting us more into a negative streak. So we'll see if that's able to develop, and if the magenta crosses below yellow. They're both falling at this particular stage, and it corresponds to what we see from a shakeout standpoint. So those are all pretty congruent. From a NASDAQ standpoint, you can see the potential of a magenta candle building right there, because a big difference in the DOC where you already have, in this case, the cyan at 7 to a negative 127 on the red. So that means the cyan has already moved over it, as well as the green is now below red. So we'll see how that continues throughout the day. That would be a weakness developing there, and that could cause some expanded issues within the S&P itself. From a gold standpoint, it's still trying to mutter along here. It's right at the key inflection points. Shortly you'll see that all the charts will have the NBI indicator, the lead portion of it there, because what we've done is we've taken some of these Power Mode 2 readings and DOC as well as Shakeout, combined them into that NBI indicator just for the ease of following it, and that's what the new paint bar reflects. Speaking of new paint bar, this is PNT2. Go ahead and click a bar. If I can get it to do that. There we go. We're on the PNT2. So we can see how it identified the bottom at that portion. We had a couple of positive extremes from there, and then some of these were the ones from the previous week that had not been filled yet, and that's exactly what's happening to them right now as we get our sell signal. Where'd that come in? 59,300, and here we are at 56. So not bad, and clearly representing it, because you can see you have the blue under the green. Weak, as well as the crossover potential. Flipping to the 5K, well, we can look at where we're at right at this moment. We had a sell come in, what is it, about 63 and a quarter. We're right about there. And it's interesting because as I've been, making the adjustments and the changes, we actually had a pretty good day live. If we'll go back to the beginning of it, started out with our short, came down, we ended up with an NBI candle, and it just took forever. And what I was pointing out with that NBI candle before was, even though we were still rising within the green in that, you had the blue line below, which is still somewhat bearish going through it. It wasn't until it transferred and crossed right about there. You already still had magenta over the yellow, but when it crossed over there, that was the beginning of the potential for momentum. And then eventually, once the green ticks up, boom, took off, and that led to a nice run until right about here. We ended up with a soft signal, and we were talking about this because just as it was coming across, we ended up with this setup right there, where if you look at where it says punt, -276, we know that when we get to below -1 on that red MBI, that you're looking for the potential of a reversal. In this particular case, we kind of look for the cross of the green DOC above red. That triggered pretty much right there. Give plenty of opportunities. We knew this once we get to that negative, you were going to get it. So taking gain off of that tiny short, worthwhile. The long comes through, and right up to the middle of it there, you started to get the cross of magenta below, and I think blue was actually almost at that same configuration. I don't know if I can get it up here where you can see what the reading is on that, but there, that makes it much easier. You can see that blue had already dropped to 1946 below the 2095. So you had all the configurations for a short, but then still profitable range on the long side. And then we hit the short setup, and we started the dive. What I'm checking is that normally I would have gotten buy configuration within this, and this is where I go through the different language, because we could see that we had full DOC steel to 0 at this particular stage right here, and then the immediate drop of orange, which is enough to get you back up to the peaks, and then of course it begins to fade pretty quickly. Blue kind of dipped below early at a brief point right up here where it popped above, but continued back below. Then the MBI came in, and it was a legitimate signal. I mean, everything triggering here. You had rising gold, you had rising azure, shakeout was improving, orange dip, all of those things were working out. But interestingly enough, green, the blue crosses back above, and then it just kind of rolls over. Now, what's interesting about it was we also ended up down at the bottom here with this dip of the red down in the -2 range, and earlier at 1.26 on that. So it's just a matter of waiting for that blue to tick up and the green, and then I look for magenta over the yellow for the buy, and it kind of converts it there. This wasn't a huge drop. We went from a 67 entry, and the low was 58, so it was under 10 points for the turnaround. But from my viewpoint, it's like when I can see that there's going to be weakness within particular setup, and in this particular case, we never went to an extremely bearish setup, because you ended up with magenta literally over yellow the entire time of that turnaround slip. And then it wasn't until right about now that we're getting the weaker configurations, which is, again, the blue has been underneath green for, well, all the way since basically the upturn. And when magenta crossed over, theoretically, this is a softer position. And these are some of the little details that I worked through with my little dots and develop a consistency with that, because it's got to appear over long ranges of time and all kinds of considerations. But as far as that goes, we're still within that configuration, though you have magenta still above yellow, so that's kind of keeping things from breaking down. Breakdown of magenta below, you would expect to see at least that 40-60 level. So we'll keep an eye on that and how that goes. But overall, very good stuff. Be shipping out the MBI indicator plus the updates that I've made since the last one that I set out for the PNT2A. So you'll have those as well. As always, trade well. We'll talk to you later. Look for any updates on Skype chat as well.